I typed one sentence into the family group chat. You are all completely right. I just lack the emotional capacity to deal with her depression. Then I hit send and went to sleep. I was sitting in the bank manager's office for the third time this year. His name was David. He had a small framed photo of a golden retriever on his desk and a nervous habit of clicking his expensive metal pen against his mousepad. The air conditioning in his office was turned up so high I could feel the sweat drying to ice on the back of my neck. Chloe had drained my emergency savings again. I just signed the fraud waiver while she sat next to me, picking at her neon green acrylic nails, acting like forging my signature on a $5,000 check was a funny little mishap. She had on a matching pale blue sweat set that she bought with my money. David did not even try to hide his pity anymore. He stopped clicking his pen. He handed me my new account paperwork with a look that screamed, "Why do you let her do this?" I took the papers. My hand was shaking slightly. I pressed the pen down hard enough to leave a groove in the mahogany desk underneath. $5,000. It was the money I had been saving to replace the transmission in my 12-year-old Honda, which had started grinding every time I shifted into third gear. Gone. Just vanished into the black hole of my sister's existence. Once we got outside into the humid afternoon air, the heat hit us like a wet towel. I stood by my car. The pavement was radiating heat through the thin soles of my sneakers. I waited for an apology, an explanation, a single tear, anything, but I got nothing. Chloe just pulled out her phone and started fixing her lip gloss in the reflection of my passenger side window. It was the same song we had been singing since we were teenagers. Everything was always my fault, and if it wasn't my fault, it was just the universe being unfair to her. When she failed out of state college, it was because I did not proofread her sociology papers fast enough. When she got fired from the upscale clothing boutique downtown, it was because I did not call to wake her up, even though I was already 3 hours into my own shift at the hospital drawing blood from angry patients. I unlocked the doors. We got in. The car was a greenhouse. I rolled down the windows because the AC was broken. I paid for her coding boot camps that she quit after 2 weeks because the instructor's vibe was too aggressive. I funded her weekend yoga retreats in Sedona and her online life coaches who told her she was an empath who needed to protect her energy from toxic people. I worked weekend overtime shifts, 12 hours on my feet, just to keep the lights on in the 2-bedroom apartment we shared, and our parents always swallowed her excuses like candy. They called me the steady one, the reliable one. That was just their code for Chloe's personal ATM. If I complained, if I ever showed a crack in the armor, I was pulled aside by my mother and told to be the bigger person because I had my life together and Chloe was just finding her path. The ride home was completely silent except for the sound of her chewing spearmint gum and aggressively tapping on her phone screen. She was texting someone, probably complaining about the heat in my car. I drove down 4th Avenue, listening to my transmission whine, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When we finally walked into our apartment on the 3rd floor, she dropped her keys on the console table, scratching the wood right where she always scratched it, and headed straight for the fridge. She swung the door open, bathing herself in the yellow light. She pushed around a Tupperware container of my meal-prepped chicken and a half-empty jar of pickles. She loudly complained that we were out of unsweetened vanilla almond milk. Then she shut the door with her hip, sighed heavily, and asked if I was going to order sugarfish tonight because the trip to the bank really stressed her out. I looked at her. I really looked at her. She had just stolen $5 grand from me to pay off a high-interest credit card she maxed out on a girl's trip to Tulum 3 weeks ago. I saw the Instagram stories. I saw her drinking $20 mezcal cocktails on a private catamaran while I was picking up a Sunday shift to cover our electricity bill, and now she wanted me to buy her a $22 spicy tuna roll. My hands went completely numb. The numbness traveled up my arms and settled in my chest. 19 years of playing the shield for my little sister, and she truly believed I existed just to absorb her shockwaves. I was not a person to her. I was infrastructure. Go pack your bags, I said. My voice didn't even sound like my own. It was entirely flat. She looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. What are you talking about? I told her she had 1 hour to get her things and get out. The realization that I was serious hit her exactly 3 seconds later, and the tantrum was spectacular. It was like watching a toddler who suddenly acquired the vocabulary of a bitter adult. She screamed that I was a terrible sister. She paced the kitchen, her face turning red, waving her phone in the air. She grabbed my favorite ceramic coffee mug from the drying rack, the one I bought in Seattle 5 years ago, and threw it at the wall. It shattered into a dozen jagged white pieces that skittered across the linoleum. I didn't flinch. I just pulled out one of the metal kitchen stools, sat down, and looked at the clock above the stove. It was 3:15 p.m. She stormed down the hall to her bedroom. I listened to the frantic opening and closing of drawers, the sound of hangers being ripped off the closet rod. 10 minutes later, she dragged her 2 massive hard-shell suitcases down the hall. She deliberately banged the wheels against the door frames, leaving black scuff marks on the white paint, just to show me how much I was hurting her. She stood in the entryway, chests heaving, tears streaming down her face, genuine tears, because she was finally facing a consequence. I just watched the clock. 50 minutes later, she called our dad to come get her. She put it on speakerphone. She sobbed loudly into the receiver that I had lost my mind, that I was having some kind of psychotic break and throwing her onto the street. Dad's voice came through the tinny speaker, tight and panicked, telling her to just wait outside and he would be right there. When the front door finally clicked shut behind her, the silence in the apartment was deafening. I sat on the stool for another 10 minutes. Then I got up, got the broom from the pantry, and swept up the pieces of my shattered mug. I threw them in the trash. I wiped down the counter. It was beautiful. That piece lasted exactly 3 days. I spent the weekend sleeping, actually sleeping, waking up at 10 in the morning instead of jerking awake at 6 to make sure Chloe hadn't left the front door unlocked again. But on Monday morning, while I was pouring my coffee, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. I cannot believe you threw your own sister onto the street just because she finally admitted she is deeply depressed. I stared at the screen. The coffee in my mug stopped swirling. I actually smiled. It was a tight, humorless smile. It is a strange, chilling feeling when someone shows you the exact depths of their manipulation. Chloe hadn't told them about the forged check. She hadn't told them about the bank manager, the fraud waiver, or the $5,000. She had gone home, cried on their expensive leather sofa, and played her trump card. Then my phone really started exploding. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my inbox filled with absolute venom. Aunt Sarah sent me a long paragraph about how family is everything and I was going to regret this when I was old and alone. Cousin Mark texted me a single clown emoji. I opened Instagram. Chloe had made a massive, multi-slide text post about her brave mental health journey. She wrote about the heavy, suffocating weight of depression. She wrote about how hard it was to just get out of bed. And then she wrote about how the people you trust the most can sometimes be the cruelest, and how her own sister kicked her out of her home for simply struggling to function. The comments were sickening. Her friends were calling her a warrior. Family members were calling me an ableist monster. They said I had zero empathy. My dad left a brutal brutal voicemail on my phone. His voice was cold, harder than I had ever heard it. He told me he was ashamed to call me his daughter. He said I was dead inside. The dark irony of it all burned my throat. I was the one who had paid for her therapy for 3 years. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m., I sent $120 via Venmo to Dr. Evans because Chloe claimed she couldn't figure out the insurance portals. I was the one who bought her the leather-bound gratitude journals she never used. I was the one who sat in the waiting room, holding her purse, while she complained that the magazines were too old. But she had finally found the ultimate victim card. She found the one narrative that would make her untouchable in the modern world, and the one narrative that would make me the villain forever. I sat at my dining table and opened my laptop. I opened the family group chat. There were 22 people in it. I started pulling files from my desktop. I attached the bank statements showing the exact moment the $5,000 was withdrawn. I attached the PDF copy of the forged check with her roller coaster handwriting. I attached the screenshots of her Tulum vacation, the ones she had hidden from our parents but forgot to hide from my burner account, showing timestamps that matched exactly with the days she claimed she was too depressed to leave her bed. All the receipts of her stealing from me, lying to me, and draining my life while claiming to be paralyzed by mental illness. My thumb hovered over the enter key. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was ready to burn her entire narrative to the ground. I was ready to watch the fallout. I wanted Dad to see the check. I wanted Mom to see the mezcal. Then I stopped. I looked around my apartment. The afternoon light was hitting the floorboards perfectly. It was quiet. The air didn't smell like stale trash. My keys were on the console table, exactly where I left them. My wallet was on the counter, and I knew exactly how much cash was inside it because no one was skimming 20s out of it while I was in the shower. No one was leaving passive-aggressive notes about the groceries. No one was going to come through the door and demand a $22 sushi roll. I realized that if I sent the proof, I would win the argument, but I would just be inviting the circus back into my life. The group chat would explode. My mother would call me, crying, apologizing, asking how we could fix this. My dad would drive over, looking defeated, asking me to help him figure out what to do with her. There would be family interventions. There would be tearful apologies from Chloe. There would be promises to go to rehab, to do better, to pay me back. And eventually, because I was the steady one, because I was the infrastructure, they would pressure me to let her move back in. I deleted the PDF of the check. I deleted the bank statements. I deleted the Tulum screenshots. I erased the angry, defensive paragraphs I had typed out. Instead, I typed one single sentence. You are all completely right. I just lack the emotional capacity to deal with her depression, so please do not contact me until she is fully cured. I hit send. Then I put my phone on airplane mode, walked into my bedroom, and went to sleep. Let her milk that story until it runs dry. Let them all think I am the heartless monster she described. Let them shoulder the weight of her existence. 6 weeks went by. It was the longest, most glorious stretch of peace I had experienced in my entire adult life. I changed the locks on my apartment the next morning. I blocked every single family member who had sent me an insulting message. I stopped picking up weekend shifts. I started going to the farmer's market on Sundays. My savings account was actually growing again. I had the transmission in the Honda rebuilt, and it shifted as smooth as glass. I slept through the night, every single night, without clenching my jaw. I didn't realize how much of my physical body had been dedicated to carrying Chloe's stress until the weight was gone. My shoulders dropped 2 inches. My skin cleared up. Then, on a Thursday night around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an unknown number. I normally don't answer them, but I was reading a book and losing focus anyway, so I swiped right. I held the phone to my ear. I didn't say anything. It was Chloe. I could hear the traffic in the background. She was crying, but it wasn't the performative, weaponized crying she used when she wanted something from our parents. It was that frantic, ugly, real crying. The kind where you can't catch your breath. She was at a hotel downtown, the Marriott on 6th. She was speaking so fast I had to piece the words together. Mom and Dad had kicked her out. She had stolen their emergency credit card, the one Dad kept in his desk drawer for medical expenses, and used it to book a suite because they were suffocating her with their rules. Dad found out. He drove to the hotel. He canceled the card, took her car keys, and left her there. Hotel security was currently standing in the lobby with her, threatening to call the police if she did not settle her incidental room bill immediately. Please, she begged, her voice cracking so hard it squeaked. I have nowhere to go. Dad blocked my number. Mom isn't answering. You have to come down here and pay this. It is just $800. Please. I'm so sorry. I'll do whatever you want. I'll get a job tomorrow. Please. I leaned back against my headboard. I looked at the ceiling fan spinning slowly in the dark. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. It started small in my chest and bubbled up into my throat, echoing through my quiet, safe bedroom. It was a real laugh. Why would I do that? I asked her. The line went totally quiet on her end, except for her ragged breathing. You know I do not believe in helping depressed people. I hung up the phone. I tapped the screen, blocked the number, and went back to my book. I didn't hear from anyone for 3 months after that night at the Marriott. Summer turned into a harsh, windy autumn. The leaves in the hospital parking lot turned brittle and got pulverized under the tires of the ambulances. I kept working. I kept saving. I bought a new couch, a deep navy velvet one that Chloe would have absolutely ruined with self-tanner within a week. Then, on a Tuesday morning in November, I walked out of the hospital after a grueling 12-hour night shift. The air was freezing. I was zipping up my jacket, searching my pockets for my keys. When I saw him, my dad was leaning against the hood of my Honda. He looked terrible. He was wearing his gray winter coat, but it looked too big for him now. He hadn't shaved in days, and the bags under his eyes were dark purple. He held 2 styrofoam cups of cafeteria coffee. When he saw me, he stood up straight, offering a weak, trembling smile. I stopped 10 feet away. I didn't reach for the coffee. What do you want? I asked. My breath plumed in the cold air. His face crumbled a little. He lowered the cups. Can we just talk? 5 minutes, please. I unlocked the car with my key fob. It beeped, loud in the empty lot. You have 3. He swallowed hard. He looked down at the asphalt, then back up at me. She pawned my table saw, he said. His voice was hollow. The one my dad gave me. She pawned it for $600 and bought a purebred French bulldog puppy. Then she left the dog in the garage for 2 days without food while she stayed at some guy's apartment. I didn't react. I just looked at him. We had to call animal control, he continued, wiping a hand roughly over his face. Your mother is on blood pressure medication now. We locked down our credit, but she found a blank checkbook in the basement and wrote $4 grand out to cash. The bank flagged it, thank God, but they're threatening to press charges. She was screaming at us, calling us abusers. He looked at me, his eyes wet. She called your mother a narcissist and spat on the kitchen floor. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. It was the absolute absence of surprise. I'm sorry, he whispered. You were right. We didn't know. We thought you were just being harsh. You thought I was the steady one. I finished for him. He nodded, looking utterly defeated. How did you do it for so long? I didn't, I said. I opened my car door. I stopped. That's why she's your problem now. He reached out, his hand hovering over the roof of my car. She's at Aunt Sarah's now. Sarah took her in last week because she She said family is everything and we were abandoning her. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped his throat. Sarah called me this morning crying because Chloe stole her husband's golf clubs and sold them on Facebook Marketplace. Sounds like Sarah is learning a lot about family, I said. Please, my dad said. His voice cracked. He sounded exactly like Chloe had on the phone that night at the Marriott. The manipulation just took a different form. He wanted me to step back in. He wanted the shield back. We don't know what to do. She won't listen to us. She needs professional help, maybe a facility, but we can't afford it anymore. She respects you. She fears you now. If you just came over, if you just talked to her. No, the word hung in the freezing air between us. It was sharp, final. You called me a monster, I told him, looking him dead in the eye. You left a voicemail telling me you were ashamed to call me your daughter because I wouldn't let her bleed me dry anymore. You chose her narrative. You bought the ticket, Dad. Now you get to ride the ride. I got into my car and slammed the door. I started the engine. The rebuilt transmission purred. He stood there for a second, looking through the glass, holding the 2 cooling cups of coffee. Then he slowly backed away. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the parking lot without checking my rearview mirror. Thanksgiving came 2 weeks later. I didn't go home. I didn't ask what their plans were. I stayed in my apartment, blasting a jazz playlist, and cooked myself a thick ribeye steak with garlic mashed potatoes. I opened a $40 bottle of red wine just for me. At 4:30 p.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Aunt Sarah. Please, I know we said some things, but I am begging you. She locked herself in the guest bathroom and says she's going to flood the house if we don't give her the keys to my husband's truck. Please come get her, just for a few days. We are desperate. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted rich and heavy. I picked up my phone and typed my reply. Family is everything, Sarah. You'll regret it when you're old and alone if you kick her out now. Have a great Thanksgiving. I hit send. Then I deleted the thread, blocked her number, and sat down at my table to eat my steak while it was still hot. The winter dragged on. The holidays passed in a quiet blur. I worked. I slept. I read books. I didn't get any more texts from family members. I assumed they had all created a new group chat without me to organize the chaos of Chloe's existence. In late January, the buzzer to my apartment rang. It was 8 a.m. on a Saturday. I pressed the intercom button. It was the police. I buzzed them up, pulled on a thick wool cardigan, and opened my door. 2 officers stood in the hallway. One had a clipboard. The hallway smelled faintly of my neighbors brewing dark roast coffee and the damp fabric of their heavy winter uniforms. Are you the resident of apartment 3B? The older officer asked. I said yes. We are looking for Chloe. We have a warrant for her arrest regarding theft of a motor vehicle and felony fraud. She listed this as her primary residence. She hasn't lived here since August, I said. I didn't blink. I didn't panic. My heart rate didn't even tick up. I kicked her out for stealing from me. The officer raised an eyebrow. He asked if I knew where she was. I gave him my parents' address and Aunt Sarah's address. I told him about the Marriott and the stolen golf clubs. I offered to print out the bank fraud paperwork from August to prove she was no longer a resident here. He waved me off, jotted down the addresses, thanked me for my time, and left. I closed the door, locked a deadbolt, and went back to making my coffee. 3 days later, I got a collect call from the county jail. I accepted the charges. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe? The morbid fascination of watching a train finally hit the concrete barrier at full speed? They arrested me, Chloe said. Her voice wasn't frantic this time. It was flat, hollow, stripped of all the theatrics. At Sarah's house, Dad pressed charges for the check. Sarah pressed charges for the truck. Okay, I said. Bail is $10,000. They want a 10% bond. $1,000. She paused. I heard a heavy metal door clank shut somewhere in the background, a harsh, echoing sound. Mom and Dad won't pick up. Sarah blocked me. You are the only one left. I am not doing it, I said. I am wearing a paper suit, she whispered. Her voice broke just a little. The reality was finally bleeding through the delusion. It is freezing. They took my shoelaces. The girl in the cell next to me has been screaming for 4 hours. Sounds like a good place to reflect, I said. I will die in here, she sobbed. You won't, I told her. You will go to arraignment. You will get a public defender. You will face a judge. You will probably get probation and mandatory rehab because it is your first felony charge. You will survive, Chloe, but you are going to do it without my money. You are a sociopath, she spat. The victim mask slipped right back on, instant and reflexive. You are enjoying this. No, I said, looking out my window at the gray, overcast winter sky. I am just finally resting. I hung up. I didn't block the jail's number, but I never answered it again. The trial happened in March. I didn't go. I heard through the grapevine a cousin who still occasionally liked my photos on Instagram that she pled guilty. 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory inpatient psychiatric and substance abuse treatment, and complete restitution to Dad and Sarah. She was living in a state-funded halfway house on the industrial side of the city. My parents lost their minds trying to manage her probation requirements. They drove her to random drug tests. They paid for the halfway house fees. They aged 10 years and 6 months. Dad retired early to keep an eye on her. Mom stopped going to her garden club because she couldn't stand the questions from the other women. One afternoon in April, I was at the grocery store, picking out avocados in the produce section. The store was playing a soft, instrumental version of an 80s pop song. I smelled fresh basil and damp earth from the misting sprinklers over the lettuce. I turned around and saw my mother. She was standing by the organic apples, staring at me. She looked incredibly frail. Her hair, usually dyed a perfect auburn every 4 weeks, was completely gray at the roots. She held a plastic produce bag in her hand, her knuckles white, her posture slumped. I stood still. I waited. She slowly walked over to me. She didn't try to hug me. She stopped a few feet away, looking down into my basket. It had fresh salmon, a bottle of nice white wine, expensive Gruyere cheese, just things for me. You look healthy, she said. Her voice was raspy. I am, I said. She nodded slowly. She looked down at the linoleum floor, then back up at me. We are exhausted. I know. She missed a probation meeting last week. The officer said if she misses another one, they will violate her and send her to state prison. I haven't slept in 4 days. Your father's blood pressure is out of control. She grabbed the handle of her empty shopping cart. We don't know how you did it for 19 years. I did it by giving up my own life, I said. I looked right at her. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt a profound, heavy pity. And when I asked for help, you called me a monster. Tears welled up in her eyes. We were wrong. We were so wrong. Please, can we just get coffee? Can we just talk? I looked at my mother. I remembered all the times I called her, crying in my 20s, because Chloe had ruined another apartment, stolen another deposit, wrecked another car. I remembered Mom telling me to be the bigger person. I remembered the text message she sent after I finally drew a line. I cannot believe you threw your own sister onto the street. No, I said quietly. A single tear slipped down her cheek, cutting through her foundation. You are just going to throw us all away? You threw me away a long time ago, Mom, I said. You just didn't realize it until you lost your meat shield. I turned my cart around and walked toward the checkout registers. I didn't look back. I paid for my groceries. I walked out into the crisp spring air, put my bags in the trunk of the Honda, and drove home. When I got to my apartment, I put the groceries away. I poured myself a glass of the white wine wine. I sat down on my new navy velvet couch. The late afternoon sun was streaming through the window, catching the dust motes in the air, making them look like tiny floating sparks of gold. The apartment was dead silent. I took a sip of my wine. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. 2 years passed. The silence that started as a strange, heavy blanket in my apartment became the foundation of my entire life. I stopped checking my blocked messages folder. I stopped looking over my shoulder at the grocery store. I got a promotion at the hospital, moving up to floor coordinator. It came with a 12% raise and, for the first time in my nursing career, a schedule that didn't require me to ruin my circadian rhythm. I worked Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. I finally sold the 12-year-old Honda. I traded it in for a slightly used Subaru Outback. When I sat in the dealership and the finance guy ran my credit, he whistled. He told me I qualified for the lowest interest rate they offered. I signed the paperwork without my hand shaking. I didn't need a fraud waiver. I didn't have anyone sitting next to me picking at their acrylic nails. It is terrifying how quickly you can build a stable life when you aren't constantly bailing out a sinking ship. On a rainy Tuesday in October, I came home from work and checked my tiny metal mailbox in the lobby. There were a couple of bills, a grocery store circular, and a thick cream-colored envelope. There was no return address, but I recognized the looping cursive handwriting instantly. It was my mother's. I took the mail upstairs. I hung my wet coat on the hook by the door. I fed my cat a stray tabby I had adopted 6 months prior, named Barnaby. I listened to him crunch his dry food while I stood at the kitchen island and stared at the envelope. I almost threw it away unopened. I held it over the trash can, but that same morbid curiosity from the jail call crept back up my spine. I tore the flap open. There was a single folded piece of heavy stock paper inside. The letter was dated 3 weeks ago. My mother wrote that Dad had suffered a mild myocardial infarction, a heart attack in August. He was alive. He was recovering, but the doctors told him he could not endure any more stress. He had to fully retire. Because he had cashed out a chunk of his pension early to pay for Chloe's restitution and halfway house fees, they were completely broke. They were selling the house I grew up in. They were moving into a 2-bedroom condo out in the suburbs. The second paragraph was where the hook was hidden. Chloe was living with them again. She had completed her probation, but she couldn't find a job because of her felony record. She was back in her childhood bedroom, though she would be moving to the condo with them. Mom wrote that the medical bills from Dad's hospital stay were drowning them. The bank was delaying the closing on their house. They needed cash to secure the down payment on the condo, or they would lose it and effectively be homeless. The last line was written in pen that had been pressed so hard it indented the paper. We are asking for a $15,000 bridge loan just until the house closes. You are the only one who has it. Please. We are family. I set the letter down on the quartz countertop. I didn't feel a spike of adrenaline. I didn't feel the old familiar panic that used to seize my chest whenever my phone rang after 9 p.m. I just felt a deep, hollow exhaustion. Dad almost died. They were losing the house. They were facing actual ruin. And even in the face of their own mortality and financial collapse, their core operating system hadn't changed. They still had Chloe living under their roof, draining their resources. And they were still looking at me not as a daughter, but as an emergency fund. They wanted $15,000. They called it a loan, but I knew what it was. It was a tax for surviving them. They truly believed that because I had built a safe harbor, I was obligated to let them dock their burning boats in it. I picked up my phone. I could have texted her. I could have sent a scathing paragraph about the audacity of asking me for money after calling me a monster. I could have pointed out that Chloe was still living with them, meaning my money would just be subsidizing the exact same parasite that put Dad in the cardiac ward in the first place. But explanations are for people who want to understand you. My parents never wanted to understand me. They just wanted to use me. I took the cream-colored letter and ripped it in half. Then I ripped the halves into quarters. I opened the cabinet under the sink, dropped the pieces into the trash bag right on top of some damp coffee grounds, and tied the bag shut. I took the trash out to the dumpster in the alley behind my building. The rain was coming down harder now, cold and sharp against my face. I threw the bag into the rusted green bin and let the heavy plastic lid slam shut. The sound echoed off the brick walls of the alley. When I got back upstairs, my apartment was warm. Barnaby was asleep on the navy velvet couch, curled into a tight orange ball. The streetlights outside were flicking on, casting a soft amber glow through the rain-streaked windows. I went to the fridge and poured myself a glass of cold water. I drank it slowly, feeling it wash down my throat. 19 years of being the steady one. 19 years of absorbing the shockwaves. They used to tell me I lacked empathy. They used to tell me I was selfish. I walked over to the couch, sat down, and pulled a blanket over my legs. The cat purred, a low, steady rumble of absolute contentment. I realized they were right. I was selfish. I was finally keeping my life for myself, and I was never going to apologize for it again. 5 more years passed. 7 years total since I sat in David the bank manager's freezing office. 7 years since the shattered coffee mug on the linoleum floor. Life didn't just stay stable. It took root and grew. I bought a small, 2-bedroom townhouse with a fenced-in patio where Barnaby the cat could sunbathe safely. I met a man named Thomas, a middle school science teacher with a quiet, steady energy. When I told him about my family on our 4th date, over bowls of pho in a crowded restaurant, he didn't flinch. He didn't offer platitudes about how blood is thicker than water. He just listened, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and said, "It sounds like you had to be your own mother. I'm glad you're done." My parents never got the condo. I found out through the same distant cousin who watched my Instagram stories. Dad's medical debt and Chloe's continued existence swallowed the down payment. They ended up renting a cramped apartment in a sprawling complex next to a noisy interstate. Dad took a part-time job scanning receipts at a big box hardware store just to afford his blood pressure medication. Mom was working the front desk at a local dentist's office. They were in their late 60s, entirely depleted, working themselves into the grave to keep a roof over the head of a 30-year-old woman who still refused to save herself. I never reached out, not once. It was a humid Saturday afternoon in August. I was at a large discount home goods store, pushing a squeaky cart, looking for ceramic planters for my patio. The store smelled faintly of cinnamon brooms and cheap plastic. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed with a low, constant hum. I was turning down the aisle with the outdoor decor when I heard it. "Are you kidding me? I bought this here last week. You have to take it back." The voice was grating, nasal, dripping with that specific, aggressive entitlement I knew in my marrow. I stopped my cart. I looked past a display of fake ivy. It was Chloe. She was standing at the customer service desk, arguing with a teenage employee who looked like he was about to cry. Chloe looked entirely different, yet exactly the same. The expensive matching sweat sets were gone, replaced by faded leggings and an oversized, stained t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a messy clip, the blonde dye grown out by several inches, exposing dark, greasy roots. She was holding a smashed, generic brand toaster oven, demanding a cash refund without a receipt. The teenager kept pointing to the store policy sign taped to the counter. Chloe kept slamming her hand flat on the laminate surface. I stood in the aisle, completely still. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't drop. There was no adrenaline dump, no urge to fix it, no urge to run away. I just watched her. She turned around in frustration, scanning the front of the store as if looking for a manager to scream at, and then her eyes landed on me. She froze. The anger vanished from her face, replaced instantly by a wide-eyed, frantic calculation. She dropped her hand from the counter. She left the broken toaster oven sitting there and started walking toward me. Her gait was hurried, almost desperate. I didn't move. I kept my hands resting lightly on the red plastic handle of my shopping cart. Oh my God, she breathed as she stopped 3 feet away from me. She looked me up and down. She saw my clean linen shirt. She saw my leather sandals. She saw the quiet, comfortable life radiating off me. I can't believe it's you. Hello, Chloe, I said. My voice was entirely neutral. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. The reflex was still there, but it looked pathetic now. It didn't hold any power. I'm doing so bad, she whispered, her voice trembling. Mom and Dad kicked me out again. Dad had another heart scare. Mom blames me. I've been sleeping in my car for 3 nights. It's so hot at night. I haven't eaten a real meal since Wednesday. She waited. She took a ragged breath and looked at me, her eyes wide, playing the absolute ultimate victim. She was waiting for the infrastructure to kick in. She was waiting for me to pull out my wallet, to offer my spare bedroom, to tell her it was going to be okay. I looked at her face. I saw the deep lines forming around her mouth from years of scowling. I saw the exhaustion. It was real. Her suffering was entirely real. But I also knew, with absolute crystalline certainty, that if I gave her an inch, she would take my entire life. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Her brow furrowed. The tears stopped halfway down her cheeks. You're sorry? That's it? I'm telling you I'm homeless and you're just sorry? Yes. Can you at least give me some money for gas? She demanded, the desperation sharpening into hostility. The victim mask slipping to reveal the teeth underneath. Just $40. Come on. You look like you're doing great. $40 is nothing to you. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The ghost of the little sister I used to protect. The ghost of the family I used to anchor. They were completely gone. There was just this stranger standing in front of me, holding an empty cup, furious that I wouldn't bleed into it. I don't have any cash on me, I said. Then go to an ATM, she snapped, her voice rising, drawing the attention of a woman browsing the throw pillows nearby. You're seriously just going to let me starve? You're still this cold, heartless bitch after everything? I gripped my cart. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't justify myself. Goodbye, Chloe, I said. I turned my cart around. The squeaky wheel chirped against the polished concrete floor. You're a monster, she screamed at my back, her voice echoing off the high metal ceiling of the warehouse store. You're going to rot in hell for what you did to this family. I kept walking. I didn't look over my shoulder. I walked past the ceramic planters, past the checkout lanes, and out the automatic glass doors into the bright, suffocating heat of the parking lot. When I reached my Subaru, I unlocked it, climbed in, and shut the door. The heavy thud of the car door cut off the noise of the outside world completely. I turned the key. The air conditioning roared to life, blowing cold air against my face. I sat there for a minute, looking out through the windshield at the blinding reflection of the sun on the asphalt. I thought about the family group chat all those years ago. I thought about the text I sent. I just lacked the emotional capacity to deal with her depression. It wasn't a lie then, and it wasn't a lie now. I lacked the capacity to be destroyed by her. I put the car in drive, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove home to my quiet house. Dad died 2 years later. It was a Tuesday in November. I didn't get a phone call from my mother. I didn't get a frantic, sobbing voicemail from Chloe. I found out through a Google alert I had set up on my laptop years ago. Just a simple string of text with my parents' names and my hometown. The alert popped up while I was at my desk at the hospital, reviewing nursing schedules. It was a link to a digital obituary from a strip mall funeral home. He was 69. He had suffered a massive stroke in the break room of the hardware store, where he was still working 20 hours a week. He died before the ambulance ever reached the hospital doors. I sat back in my ergonomic office chair. The hospital HVAC unit hummed above me. I looked at the little thumbnail photo they had chosen for the obituary. It was at least 15 years old, taken at a family barbecue back when his hair was still thick and his eyes didn't have that hollow, hunted look. I didn't cry. My chest didn't heave. I just felt a quiet, heavy finality settle over my shoulders, like a heavy lead apron in an x-ray room. The funeral was scheduled for that Friday. I took the morning off. Thomas offered to come with me, his hand resting warm and steady on the back of my neck as I stood by our front door, buttoning my black wool coat. I need to do this alone, I told him. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and told me he would have dinner ready when I got back. I drove out to the suburbs. The sky was the color of dirty concrete, threatening snow but only spitting a fine, freezing drizzle. The funeral home was squeezed between a discount mattress store and a chain pharmacy. The asphalt in the parking lot was cracked and filled with oily puddles. I didn't walk down the center aisle. I slipped in through the heavy side doors just as the service was starting and stood in the very back, half hidden by a fake ficus tree and a display of cheap, laminated prayer cards. The room smelled like floor wax, dust, and dying carnations. There were maybe 20 people there, mostly older relatives. Aunt Sarah was in the third row, looking completely aged, leaning heavily on a cane. And then there was my mother and Chloe in the front row. My mother looked like a ghost that hadn't realized it was dead yet. She was swallowed by a black dress that was 3 sizes too big. She just stared straight ahead at the closed mahogany casket, completely motionless. Chloe was putting on a masterpiece. She was wearing a black bodycon dress that belonged in a downtown nightclub, not a funeral parlor. She was draped over the front pew, sobbing so loudly it echoed off the cheap acoustic ceiling tiles. Every time the junior pastor tried to speak, Chloe wailed, making sure every single eye in the room remained fixed on her. She wasn't grieving my father. She was grieving her infrastructure. She was grieving the man whose pension she had drained, whose retirement she had ruined, and whose heart she had finally, permanently broken. I watched her perform, and for the very first time in my entire life, I didn't feel a single drop of anger. I didn't feel resentment. I just felt absolute, sterile disgust. She was a parasite, and she had finally killed the host. The pastor finished his lukewarm eulogy. The funeral director, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, announced that the family would receive condolences in the adjoining lobby. I didn't stay for the reception. I didn't need to look down into a wooden box to know my father was gone. He had been gone for a decade. I turned and pushed through the heavy side doors, stepping back out into the freezing drizzle. The cold air was a shock to the lungs, sharp and clean. I pulled my collar up and started walking toward the Subaru. You came? The voice was like dry leaves scraping across pavement. I stopped. I turned around. My mother was standing under the small canvas awning of the side exit. She had a trembling cigarette between her fingers. She wasn't wearing a coat, and her thin arms were covered in goosebumps. I stood in the rain. I did. She took a drag of the cigarette. Her hand was shaking so badly the cherry glowed in erratic little bursts. She looked at me. She looked at my warm coat, my leather boots, the keys in my hand. He asked for you, she croaked, her eyes filled with tears. In the hospital. Right before he died. He asked asked why you weren't there. It was a lie. A desperate, pathetic lie meant to hook me, meant to drag me down into the guilt and the mud where she lived. The obituary said he died before the ambulance arrived. If someone lies, Mom, they should be better at it, I said. My voice was perfectly flat. No malice, no heat, just the truth. He died in the break room. She flinched as if I had struck her across the face. The cigarette almost slipped from her fingers. The illusion shattered, leaving nothing but the ruins of her choices. We have nothing left, she whispered. The tears finally spilled over, cutting through the powdery makeup on her cheeks. The life insurance policy lapsed 3 months ago because I couldn't pay the premium. Chloe took the car last night and didn't come back until dawn. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this casket. She took a step toward me. The ultimate plea. Please, she said. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. I looked at the woman who had called me a monster, who had demanded I set myself on fire to keep her favorite child warm. You chose her, Mom, I said. You chose her every single time, and now you have her. All to yourself. I didn't wait for a response. I turned my back on her and walked to my car. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I pulled out of the cracked asphalt lot. I merged onto the highway, leaving the strip mall, the dying carnations, and the ghosts behind me. The drive home took 40 minutes. The freezing drizzle turned into a steady, quiet snow by the time I pulled into my neighborhood. I parked in my driveway. The lights in my townhouse were on, casting a warm, golden glow onto the snow-dusted lawn. Through the front window, I could see Barnaby asleep on the back of the navy velvet couch. I could see Thomas in the kitchen, moving around the stove, the steam rising from a pot of something that smelled like garlic and rosemary. I turned off the ignition. The engine ticked as it cooled. I sat in the silence of my car for a long moment. My bank account was full. My credit was perfect. My home was safe. Nobody was going to scream at me tonight. Nobody was going to steal from me tomorrow. I pulled the keys out of the ignition. I walked up my front steps, unlocked my own front door, and stepped inside to the warmth of a life I built entirely with my own 2 hands.